Hello all and welcome to Stingray Tom's Florida and another dip into the archive. Today's video is the third and for now final installment of my series on the cars and trucks that call Universal Studios in Orlando home. If you haven't seen them, I suggest watching the first two, which discuss the vehicles that are connected with the characters, such as the Bluesmobile, Back to the Future DeLorean, and Scooby-Doo's Mystery Machine. The good news is that there isn't any need to watch them in order, so enjoy this installment and then watch the other two. I'll put links in the show notes. Universal Studios used to be described as the place where you can ride the movies. In 2021, it still is, with attractions based on The Simpsons, Harry Potter, The Fast and the Furious, Men in Black, and the Minions. But 30 years after its opening day, the only main attraction left from the very beginning is E.T., the extraterrestrial. Still, the look of the park has continued to remain fairly true to its studio backlot roots. The Hollywood area is an excellent example of that. Nearly every building is original to the park, with pretty much the same facades, signage, and design. And at the end of the street sits my favorite structure in the entire park, Mel's Diner. Mel's is a replica of the primary set in George Lucas's second movie, American Graffiti, a celebration of his own high school years at the start of the 1960s. With a production cost below $800,000 and filled with unknown actors, it was released in 1973. Many studios passed on Lucas's California coming-of-age story, but eventually Universal Pictures agreed to fund it. This was to be one of the better decisions in the history of the studio. Surprisingly, Universal allowed Lucas total artistic control and the right to final cuts on the condition that he make the movie on a strictly low budget. That agreement gave American cinema one of the most iconic movies of all time and wound up earning over $200 million in ticket and home video sales, and still counting. If you haven't seen the movie, please do, especially since it will help you appreciate some of the cars that populate the Mel's parking lot at Universal Studios Florida. Yeah, I'm finally getting to the point. Universal has 5 cars that are replicas of the primary cars from American Graffiti. They are a 1959 Edsel Corsair that was driven by Cindy Williams, a 1956 Ford Thunderbird driven by Suzanne Summers, a 1958 Chevrolet Impala driven by Ron Howard, and 2 cars that featured in the climactic race, a 1932 Ford Deuce Coupe driven by Paul LeMat, and a 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air driven by Harrison Ford. I'll take a look at each of these beautiful cars, as well as a few others that can be seen near Mel's and elsewhere in the park. Before I start, however, let me say that each car will have a basic fact sheet in this video, so feel free to hit pause to learn a bit more. Also, please understand that I am not a car expert. However, each of these cars is historically important regardless of their connection with American Graffiti. If you want to share further information or even your own experiences, please do in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Ron Howard's 1958 Impala was special for several reasons. Firstly, 1958 was the first year for the Impala, and the car was introduced to coincide with General Motors' 50th anniversary. The Impala was also considered the flagship car for Chevrolet, and it was its highest-priced model. Named for a southern African antelope, it was longer, lower, and wider than previous Chevy cars. It has relatively simple fins, but yet it has highly dramatic bullet-point taillights and one of the largest trunk decks ever. This car represents one of 125,000 Impalas General Motors made in 1958, and it shows off its white with red accents paint job. 58 was the only year that this body was offered, as the Impala would be redesigned for 1959. Since American Graffiti portrays events happening in mid-1962, this car would have been only about 3 years old. It's certainly a nice ride for a high school senior, considering that new, its base price was $2,700, or about $25,000 in 2021. Cindy Williams played Ron Howard's girlfriend in American Graffiti, and she likewise drove a rather upscale car. Her 1959 Edsel Corsair was produced by Ford Motors under the short-lived and star-crossed brand Edsel. Named after Henry Ford's son Edsel, who was named after a childhood friend of Ford's, the brand premiered in 1957 with a great deal of fanfare, although there was little market research done to see if the brand would be successful with the consumers. Considered one of the most spectacular failures in American business, Edsel would cease production after only 3 years. The irony is that the car models themselves were generally perfectly fine, though some of their features, both mechanical and cosmetic, weren't successful with the public. The blue 1959 Corsair is another striking car and shares some modeling similarities with the Impala. Like the Impala, the Corsair represented the top model for its maker. 59, being the second year for production, saw the models with toned-down styling, as that had been one of the concerns of many car buyers. Again, like the Impala, the Corsair was also wide and long and had many decorative elements, including a huge trunk deck and triple taillights. Its base price was $2,800, or only about $100 more than the Impala, and its lack of success shows in that less than 10,000 1959 Corsairs were produced, and a bunch of those were never sold. Suzanne Somers drove another Ford, a 1956 Thunderbird. One of the most famous cars of the 50s, the Ford Thunderbird was an unusual and somewhat risky model. The name got its start a year earlier with the classic first-generation body style being produced from 1955 to 1957. There were few changes between the 3 years, though possibly the most obvious is the Continental tire holder on the trunk that is only used in 56. At least that's what makes it easy to tell this T-Bird's vintage. While the T-Bird began life as Ford's answer to the Corvette, when the design was completed, it was branded more as a personal luxury car rather than a sports car. Yes, it only had 2 seats like the Vette, but because of its size, weight, styling, and somewhat limited performance, it wasn't really sporty. Further proof that it was considered a luxury car was its $3,200 base price, the highest on this list and the rough equivalent to $31,000 today. Certainly something that a teen couldn't afford, which is probably why the Beach Boys sang, "She'll have fun, 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 till her daddy takes the T-Bird away." In all, it made it the perfect car for Suzanne Somers' mysterious blonde. The T-Bird was a hardtop convertible, and the external tire storage allowed for more trunk space. While it was still compared with the Chevy Corvette, it was quite a bit more popular, with over 15,000 being made to the Vette's 3,000. Paul Lemat's 32 Deuce Coupe is as much a product of the 50s as it is of the 30s when it was originally built. Officially, it's a modified 1932 Ford Model B or Model 18, the car model that was the successor to Ford's Model A. The American Graffiti version represents the 3-window Sport Coupe, one of several models available. The Model 18 had a Flathead V8 engine, an 8-cylinder engine larger and more powerful than the Model B's 4-cylinder engine. In 1932, the base price was $440, which is about $7,800 today. It's known as the Deuce Coupe because it premiered in 1932 and was commonly referred to as the 32 Ford. It likely gained its unofficial name after World War II, when the Model B was frequently modified to make street racing cars, much like the one in American Graffiti. There were many reasons behind its success as a street rod, not the least of which was they were cheap and plentiful in used car lots and junkyards around the country. 1932 was the first year of the Flathead V8, a still classic engine with a lot of power, and the Ford Flathead was the first V8 available in an affordable mass-market automobile. The Deuce Coupe had a steel-reinforced body, which was a distinct improvement from the primary wood frames with stamped metal skins that most car makers used at the time. The reliance on steel meant lighter and more durable bodies that were much less likely to break from even the higher stresses placed upon them by their new owners. Those new owners also typically removed the fenders and running boards to save weight and increase aerodynamics. Additionally, this exposed unique frame rails, which because of their design left no brackets, brake lines, or body bracing that would be found on other cars. This all gave the Deuce a clean, simple look that has stayed popular for over 80 years. The final reason for its success was that cars got larger after 1932. Smaller cars inherently create less drag through the air, so everything being equal, they're faster. The Deuce was light, small, cheap, simple, powerful, easy to work on, highly customizable, and plentiful. Harrison's Ford 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air Street Racer is likely the baddest car in the movie. The unknown quantity of the nearly entirely black Bel Air being driven by a guy that wasn't part of the main cast added both drama and uncertainty. Known by General Motors' promotional team as the Hot One, the 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air was one of the most popular American cars of all time. Utilizing the French phrase, beautiful air, the first generation Bel Air was produced from 1950 to 1954. The 55 Bel Air was in the second generation of the model and for the first time took on the look of a classic 50s car. The 55 broke into the car scene with a sleeker look, a flatter hood, a simpler front grille that was reportedly inspired by Ferrari styling, and quarter panels that no longer bulged out from the frame. It sported the famous eyebrows over the headlights, a curved windshield, a broad sweeping chrome accent panel at the rear on the sides, and the hint of fins on the back. Of course, much of that doesn't really apply to Universal's recreation of Harrison Ford's movie car. That car has much of the chrome removed, a beefy roll cage inside, a hood scoop, and a fiberglass front end, one that flips open to access the powerful engine living underneath. While the Deuce Coupe looks quick, the Bel Air looks mean. It has one other modification. It's missing its door handles, something it has in common with the Deuce Coupe and the Impala that are on display. By the way, the 55's base price was $2,000, which is about $20,000 in 2021. Now on to Universal's classic cars that aren't part of the American Graffiti collection. The first is the 1941 Chevrolet Master Deluxe. This Chevy is one of the final versions of the Master Deluxe model made in the pre-World War II era. Similar to the Chevy Master style, both models were initially designed for release in 1933. Production lasted until early 1942 when President Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered automakers to cease production in order to switch to building trucks, tanks, airplanes, and other necessary war materials. Over the decade in which they were built, the general body type changed little. There were two versions, a two-door coupe and a four-door sedan. There was also a pickup truck version which used the same frame and front end. Universal's version is the two-door coupe, which retailed for about $750. That would be around $14,000 today. In 1941, car sales of the Master Deluxe and even more deluxe Special Deluxe reached about 1 million as the Great Depression was near its end and the possibility of the U.S. getting into World War II became ever present. One of Chevy's sales taglines at this time was, "Eye it, try it, buy it." But sadly, the end of the model run happened at the start of the next year. The U.S. entry into the war shut down the entire American car industry for about 5 years. The next car we come to is the 1952 Pontiac Chieftain. With a production run that began in 1949, the Pontiac Chieftain was the first fully newly designed car model from the General Motors brand since the end of World War II. By '52, the Chieftain was available in 6 styles, a sedan, sedan coupe, business coupe, deluxe convertible coupe, Catalina coupe, and station wagon. I believe that the model on display at Universal Studios is the two-door sedan coupe, which would have retailed for around $2,000. That has become $20,000 in 2021. It's part of the first generation of Chieftains, which were in production from 49 through 54. By 1952, Pontiac only offered the 6 Chieftain models to the public, having discontinued the larger and more expensive Streamliner model line. Among its accessories was a rather unusual one, an electric Remington auto home shaver that could be used, presumably, while sitting in traffic. While this might have been the only car to feature an electric shaver, the concept wasn't completely new. Anyone who had a cigarette lighter in their car could buy and use one. The shaver ran on either AC or DC power, making it useful in the home, car, and if Madman can be trusted as an authority, the office. Much like Universal's 32 Deuce Coupe and 1955 Bel Air, the 52 Chieftain appears to have been significantly modified for racing. I don't believe that it still has the shaver, but its chassis has been lowered and it has a terrific paint job. The 1955 Ford Fairlane Crown Victoria was a special edition Fairlane built between 1955 and 56. It should be noted that it's not directly connected to the Ford Crown Victoria that would be a separate model in later years. The Fairlane was considered Florida's top car model, and the Crown Vic was the top-of-the-line Fairlane in styling. Specifically, the Crown Vic featured a B-pillared roofline. The B-pillar referring to the main roof support directly behind the front doors, and in the Crown Vic, this pillar was a wide strip of polished stainless steel. This gave the car its crown. Here's its stats. An additional version of the Crown Vic was available in 1955 as well. While the standard Crown Vic came with the standard two-tone roof, the Crown Victoria Skyliner came with a fixed sunroof, a transparent but tinted acrylic panel which formed the entire roof ahead of the B-pillar. This huge sunroof option was striking, but not particularly popular because of the inevitable excessive heat and bright light. An air conditioner option was available, which could partly help, but in general the Skyliner was more striking than popular. The Crown Vic had a base price of $2,300, and the Skyliner was an additional $100. That would be around $22,000 and $23,000 today. By 57, both versions of the Crown Vic were discontinued, and the name wouldn't return to Ford until 1980. The pink and white Universal Crown Vic is the standard model without the acrylic roof, but it does support a Continental tire kit on the trunk like the 56 Thunderbird mentioned previously. Named for the 1939 Lincoln Continental, the car that made the external cover for the spare tire stylish and popular, multiple manufacturers used the idea over the years for both space-saving and stylistic reasons. By 1939, Ford had acquired the independent car maker Lincoln, and so it's not surprising that the company would use the Continental tire kits in some of its other models. By the way, the Lincoln Continental itself was named for the European or Continental styling of the original model. The final car covered in this video is the 1957 Bel Air. The 57 Bel Air is very similar to the 1955 version covered above. It's a body type that didn't change much over the 2 years, but what's significant is that this Universal model is much more of the standard trim with chrome bumpers and side trim. But what's significant is that this Universal model is much more in the standard trim with chrome bumpers and side trim. The 55 was modified as a street racer and has little ornamentation compared to the 57. You can see the car's stats here. Universal's 57 is a beautiful representation of what might be the most recognized make, model, and year car of the entire 1950s. It would have sold for just under $2,300 or $22,000 in today's money. Thanks once again for watching another of my videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can be notified when I post the next Stingray Tom video. Stingray Tom's Florida. traveling through time around the Sunshine State.